Welcome, everyone, to Elevate with V. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. So, this podcast was inspired by my own journey and as a way to express gratitude to all those beautiful people that have helped and supported me navigate some of my most challenging times. And I would love to share who they are and their amazing gifts with all of you. I can't wait to introduce my guest today. I know her as Sam, but she's known as Phoenix. She is an author, editor, co-creative brand design strategist, mommy, and devoted partner. These are just a few of the many hats that Phoenix Rising wears, but none more honorable than the work of collective healing through inspiration. A native of the nation's capital, Phoenix has also spent the last several years connecting with people across the globe to offer a sound, intuitive voice through the gift of energy and oracle readings. Welcome, welcome, Phoenix.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this episode. I'm like, this is a treat for me. I think, and we'll get into it, but just the way we met, even that, just seeing you do this is like incredibly, just encouraging. Like you've definitely inspired me for
Oh, thank you
sure.
so much.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so I do want to share really quickly how she and I met. I actually met her through a Facebook Live, and I followed her from there. I think first to her YouTube and then to her Instagram channel. And we've been connected through, I think, 2021, sometime in 2021. And
Yeah. Yep.
I love your energy, your
Oh,
vibe, your honesty. Like you always tell it like it is. And
thank
um,
you.
for me, it's really important also that you're just so authentic in sharing your healing journey and the lessons that you've learned. And you love to like share that openly with people. And obviously,
Mhm.
you have so many gifts, including being a powerful and gifted intuitive reader. And I know you are up to so many wonderful things. And we are going to find out more about them today. So, welcome again.
Let's do it. Let's go. Excited.
I love it. So, the show is really all about healing journeys. And I know that you've
Mhm.
been through your own healing journey. So I would love if you're, wanting to share with all of us, what event or events kind of led you
Mhm.
into stepping into your healing journey.
I would love to. I mean, it's so funny. I don't know. For me, body language is a thing, right? Voice inflection. I actually majored in communication for my undergraduate degree. And one of the things we learned is about nonverbal cues and just like breath. Like when you're communicating, how does the body respond? And if you noticed, I kind of took a little bit of a deep sigh when you asked that question. Um, and the reason I say that is because, part of my healing journey has been this realization that it doesn't actually ever end, in my opinion, because I don't know everything, but from my experience, this is just an ongoing journey and there's no pinnacle, right? There's no like I've arrived. So when you ask that question, I notice that my body still responds to some of the trauma, and I immediately think of that entry wound. So, a lot of the content that I share, a lot of the work that I try to produce is not geared towards any one group of people. I know that I'm a woman, right? So I know a lot of women do identify with my story and some of the experiences that I've shared. But then you have a lot of guys who also reach out occasionally and they just have questions about, spirituality or awakening or, they need a reading. And that's so beautiful to see. In my opinion, it is indicative of like this collective ascension in consciousness that's kind of like it's inevitable. Everyone's kind of filling it out and finding out that if there's something missing, let me go search for that. And so that's kind of how I began my journey. Was I went through, different trauma points. But I think the most significant was, issues of the heart. If I could just give you a quick backgrounder, and I love to talk, I'm not shy about it, but I'll try to condense this story. But even as I begin to tell this story again, my body's responding, which is like it just shows you like we each have different levels of ascension and healing that we course through. But as a little girl was, that was my entry wound. I was 4 years old when my father and my mom decided to divorce. I grew up in a middle class family, blue collar. My dad was a cop. Actually, he's retired. He was also in the Army and the Air Force. So, yeah, three different things going on. So that kind of gives you a picture of how busy he would have been. But hardworking man from Mississippi, raised in the 50s. So you can imagine kind of some of his trauma and what he experienced and how that might have influenced his parenting style. Um, my dad, he always sort of made his presence known. He was always there physically, but emotionally, there were things that he just wasn't able to provide. And I find that as I grow in my journey, I'm having to make room or make like, mental accommodations for that because I realize he's a human being too. But it doesn't mean that your response to that trauma disappears, right? You just kind of figure out how to get through it and how to move through it. And so I found myself trying to figure out what love actually was. What does it feel like? What does that mean? Because from my vantage point, having grown up in a broken home and seeing my parents, fight, witnessing things like that, it shapes your perception of love and relationships. So I found myself, dating people that really kind of energetically mirrored my father. And we all hear that, you marry your dad, women with daddy issues. And there's this whole conversation around toxicity in relationships, and everybody's pointing the finger, but very few people stop to kind of revel in, well, what is the root cause, right? What are the limitations within us as people that don't allow us to see others as human and fallible? So it was kind of a two-edged sword for me, having been deeply rooted in religion. I was a devout Christian as well. Um, so, I carried some sense of, I want to say, I was more reserved in my healing journey. I didn't really share a lot. So it's just amazing to be here on this platform talking to you about this because there was a time where you couldn't pay me to say anything about my experiences or even take a full body picture. I was on social media, but I wasn't as, how you put it, kind of open and authentic. I was just trying to make it through. And so just learning how to discover myself again through that type of trauma was a big, big thing for me. And I think over the last, I want to say 5 years, it's been a very intense journey that really has forced me to mature and grow as a person. That maturation process is what I wrote about, which is how you found me, believe it or not, because after kind of going through this inner child healing, dealing with the relationship with my father and I, hurtful situations and relationships with men, going through those things built my content. So when you stumbled upon me, I kind of already gone through that, what we call dark night of the soul, which is how I got into spirituality apart from religion. And then later on, tarot cards, oracle cards, and crystals, and all the things that some people within the religious sector think are taboo. But hopefully that answers your question. I can be long-winded, and like I told you, I like to talk. So, but hopefully I gave you a little bit to chew on there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And, I think the balance is always about how deep is someone going to share into like what actually happened? Because sometimes it's almost like reliving that trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are in your journey, it's almost like, that's not always comfortable, right? For someone, it's like you said, it's so many layers.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, just when you think that you've done all this work on something, and then suddenly it hits you from a different angle. Like a few months later, you're like, wait a second, I thought I did all this healing work. Where did this come from?
Listen, that is the realest thing. I think 2 weeks ago, I was like, what? Because I'm pretty sure, like, I've been here before. What is going on? And then you start wondering, well, what's going on with the moon? Is it planets? And sometimes it's just that, I think the Great Spirit is beckoning us to another level of like, you know, consciousness. It's not even an achievement per se. It's more so like what level is required for this point in my life. And I had to shed a lot of things. I had to walk away from people and it hurt. But I'm better for it. And I think, when we manage those things well, we grow well. And I'm proud to say I'm not there yet. I'm not. And that's just being real. Like my partner Christopher, him as traveling bear. I look at this guy like clockwork every day, meditates every day, works out every day. He doesn't eat meat. He's just consistent. And that's something I'm learning to adapt to, but also it just gives me this fire and this passion, like, I can go another level. I can take it up a notch. So I love to hear that we both kind of get that and you know where I'm coming from.
Yes, definitely. I totally understand. And I have to say, it's so interesting that when we go through these healing journeys, it is, like you said, there's just so many layers. But every opportunity that something comes up is a chance for us to move into that next level, into that next frequency, into that next vibration. And I think that's the beauty of it, if we can see it that way. Because sometimes what I've noticed is people get stuck, right? Because here's the thing, it is not easy work at all. Okay.
Not even close.
Not
It's
easy
not
at
a
all.
party.
And it
Not a
takes,
party yet.
yes. And it's like, it really takes like, courage to look
Yeah.
and to feel some of these things and kind of like look them in the face and realize, because so much of the journey is also about like releasing that blame, right? Because what we've learned is you just blame the other person. It's just easier that way. It was their fault. Like, that's why this happened. And then the
Yeah.
moment you get to that place where you're like, okay, well, but what was my part in this? What can
Yeah.
I own? What
Yeah.
can I look at and say, huh, I guess I got some work to do. Forget the other person. What do I need to do?
That's real. And you know what's so interesting about your perspective is I have moments where I kind of um teeter and totter. Is that the term? I don't know. You that go between, you're kind of in limbo. Some days I'm like still sad and still resentful, and that's just human. But I find myself able to kind of reel myself back in to say, okay, but in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things, where do you fall on the scale of like, all right, I'm gonna move forward because I need to. I'm not gonna hold anyone hostage in my unforgiveness. So there's times where I have to still consciously release people from the bonds of my unforgiveness, is what I say to myself. For some reason, I look at that and I say, well, I'm releasing someone from the bonds of my unforgiveness means they get to be free to also grow and to heal. And I really sincerely want that for people, even the people that have hurt me. But then I have days where I'm like, why did you do that again? So, I think we all kind of just we have our human moments, and that's real.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't agree more. So I am going to backtrack just a moment because what you were sharing in your story was part of your environment with your family about not expressing how you felt? Was it not okay to do that? Or was it just that you were already like, I already feel different, like I just don't want to create more ripples? Like, share with us a little bit what
Yeah.
that experience was.
Oh, there's so many layers. That's an amazing question, the way you posed it. I think for me, it's trifold. Um, the environment growing up, you watch your parents struggle, and somewhere in your consciousness, even as a child, you see them as like these vulnerable human beings because you know that it's not it's not normal, right? A lot of us normalize dysfunction because we're kind of brought up in it. So I think a lot of time is spent as a child trying to figure out what's normal and what is not. So you can imagine how that confusion and that type of trauma shapes your outlook on connection. Um, if I can go like a layer deeper on this point, right? My dad, um, my mom and dad got divorced, and my dad ended up remarrying. And it took some getting used to. I don't know, like 5 or 6. I really didn't have any concept of like what happened, but I knew that there was this new person. I knew that she didn't really exactly look like me or my mom or my sister. Um, and I think subconsciously I began to create little messages in my own subconscious mind about myself. I'm not pretty. My eyes aren't green. My skin isn't light. My hair isn't straight. Um, I'm not beautiful. There's something about me that just isn't enough, because if it was, he would have been here with me and my mom. So even as a little girl, I kind of took that as this factual statement in my subconscious mind. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I even knew or understood that I created that type of subconscious programming. So a lot of time was spent kind of comparing myself to other women in his life. And it was weird because that's my dad, but there was always this feeling of abandonment, like you left me and you chose someone else who was obviously better, because again, if not, you would have been here. And so a lot of women, a lot of men, a lot of us as children kind of see dynamics like that play out, and we don't always address it. I think a lot of us never do, because we're not programmed or taught or conditioned in our society to even look within. A lot of it is predicated on what's outside of you, religion and politics and labels and this and that. But so much of that time is spent getting to know systems and religions and gods and things. But when do you come into relationship with yourself? So I think I had to learn how to come into relationship with myself so that I could hear my inner child. I didn't even know she was still very much alive. I had no idea until I did some deep, deep, deep inner child healing and what I call mirror work. We can kind of talk about that a bit later too. But, part of it was just understanding what the entry wound was. And it was when my father, made certain choices. And listen, my mom she's a fallible human being too. So I'm sure that she's also made choices, and here we are. But that kind of was it in terms of environment. And I say it's trifle because I think culturally, as indigenous people or Aboriginal people of America, or quote unquote, what most people call us African American or Black, which are misnomers that I don't subscribe to. We could talk about that too, but culturally, I think the assumption is that this kind of broken home dynamic is common. And it may or may not be, but what is common is, as children, we don't always have the tools to deal with that. And so it shapes how we respond, how we love, how we see ourselves. And, you get someone like me who just grew up feeling just not good enough. I never felt like I was beautiful. Um, so it was a journey, and I'm still on that path, believe it or not. I'm still working through different things, even in my relationship which is so beautiful and healthy, but it takes getting used to because I'm not used to that. So, the environment absolutely is where that entry point or that entry wound is created, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you for sharing so beautifully. Yeah. And I think you touched on so many things. And, one of the most important things for me is, you know, everyone is impacted when parents separate or divorce happens. But I think the part that's super challenging is at least the adults have some tools versus a
Mhm.
kid. I mean, there's no tools. And so the immediate thing that happens is the kid taking the blame for the divorce, Like it happened
Absolutely.
because of me. It happened because of me, and I was not enough, and I'm not that. It's like I just can't
Hmm.
even imagine like what it does to a child. So the trauma from that alone. So I know that
Hmm.
there's so many people that are going to be listening to this that are going to relate to this
Oh
scenario,
yeah. Oh
right? And
yeah.
be like, oh my God, that's totally me. And
Hmm.
at some point it becomes one of those two venues, like you said. Either people don't even realize, they just sort of looked at it like, well, so many other people go through this too, like just suck it up and
Hmm.
just move
Hmm.
on. Or you get to a place where you're just like, it just keeps wearing on you, and at some point you're like, I just can't even function properly. Like I need to go in
Yeah.
and do some of this work for myself so that
Hmm.
I can be
Hmm.
a better version, a more healed version of myself. And
Yeah.
that's the journey that you chose to take, and to say, man, this is hard, but
Hmm.
I have to do this for myself. And then, like you said, it's like, you do some work, yet you stepped into these situations where you were kind of sort of replicating
Hmm.
this kind of broken relationship you had with your dad, because you didn't know anything else. So that's what we do. We repeat patterns until we
Yeah.
see them and say, oh, hold on now. Wait a minute.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not working. So I would love for you to share. I know we're kind of jumping around, but it's like I like to
Oh,
just
it's
kind of go with the
great.
flow and be like, hey,
Yeah.
that's what's coming up. So yeah, that's kind of where
Yeah.
I'm going now.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I can go layers deeper, you know. It's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts to this thing when you think about the healing journey, because it's just so different for everyone. But for me, like I realized, and I said earlier that it was a trifold kind of like
Yes.
dynamic where, environmental, yeah, culturally, there are some things that I think as a people we've been conditioned to just accept. For example, um, and this is probably that third layer, I think my father and my mother's family dynamic also played a part. We don't always realize the layers of trauma within our bloodline. Some of that we just act out because it is literally in ourselves. And this is why you find whole families kind of have similar dynamics. Like, on my mom's side, um, a lot of single women, or women coming from divorces or just really hurtful situations. And I think to a point, the women in my family are seen as strong, and we are. But for centuries, the quote unquote Black woman or indigenous woman in America has been conditioned to become hard. She's more in her masculine because she's had to compensate for what isn't there. And that is not to say any one sex is to blame. I don't think that at all. In fact, the platform that we have now, my partner Christopher and I, we have a podcast as well called Uncomfortable Conversations. And as you know, because you've been a part of this thing, we purposely kind of talk about this chasm between men and women in our community and some of the divisive rhetoric that people are sharing online, and the whole red pill community. I won't name names because I want to be respectful, but I don't always resonate with that. Just because I've been hurt doesn't mean I'm angry or bitter. So we want to show people what a healthy relationship and a healthy love connection actually looks like. And, we talk about our journey to healing separately and how we found each other. And you know very well kind of our story. But yeah, I think it is a journey of conscious effort to really know thyself, know yourself that way. And I always say this, if you know who you are, no one else can come and tell you who you are. You won't be confused. So I think moving through that trauma from a cultural perspective is a whole other layer. But then with my father's family growing up in Mississippi, I mean, it was not easy. Racial tension, I mean, you name it, they've been through it. And I think that definitely kind of affects the emotional body. Um, Beautiful people, my family has such a strong, rich history that we actually keep records of. So there's a lot, like we know who people are, we know where we come from, and that is kind of rare in the indigenous community or quote unquote Black community, that we keep such a record in history. And now you see this migration of a lot of us starting to wake up to the fact that we're indigenous. We are not of African descent. The whole slavery thing is questionable. Like that's a whole other topic. But my point in saying that is that cultural identity is important to your healing journey. Because now, if I know who I am spiritually and culturally, oh, that creates such a powerful dynamic where you get to lean on the wisdom of your ancestors and what they did and what worked. And so now we don't have this broken home dynamic. We're not repeating generational curses. So I've had to come in and break those chains. And that's one of the ways that I did it, was to really be in tune with who I was as a person, apart from this God that we're conditioned to get to know and be in relationship with. And that's beautiful if that's your thing or whomever. But I always challenge people on this is, well, what about you? Like, do you know who you are? So that's kind of my opinion, my long-winded opinion on the ways in which we can kind of like, overcome. And is it a matter of identifying your wounds, or is it just sitting down and talking with your family and figuring out, all right, how do we get here? Like, how can we break some of these chains? But as you know, that takes guts. That takes a lot of nerve. It's scary, but it is necessary. And I actually, if I could, I'll land my plane after this. But I had a situation, I want to say like 2 weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I shared something on Facebook. I'm not as active on Facebook as I am on Instagram. And it was a general kind of post about narcissistic abuse. And I know a lot of people are no stranger to that. I think it's just, something people talk about a lot, especially with all the information, the internet. We know a lot more than we did 20 years ago. And so I was posting about it, and I'm thinking about how I felt as a little girl being called ugly and fat and, being made fun of by my father. And in his mind, it wasn't really that big of a thing, but little did he know I would grow up to really hate how I looked. And I mean, like, I would not take photos unless I wouldn't even be on this video. Let's start there, because, the whole just not being comfortable in my skin was a big, big deal. And this is where a lot of guys took advantage of that. And, sometimes abusive people can sniff out when you're naive or broken, and unfortunately, you have people that play on that. So I had to learn how to build my boundaries, how to really know me. In that way, I was able to kind of say, hey, all right, I'm not going to accept that. This is what love looks like, because I've given it to myself now, but hopefully that all of that makes sense.
Oh, it was great. And, just so everyone knows, I mean, you can have conversations with Phoenix that'll go deep. We could be talking for hours.
We have, and yes, I love it. I love it.
It's amazing. That's why it's like, I just always enjoy our conversations, even if it's just on the lives or whatever we're doing, because it's just, it's sort of this, there's so much depth and so many layers. And I know it's impossible for us to do like one podcast episode to like get to all of the juicy stuff. But I mean, I think the point of this is really just to, whatever we can showcase and highlight about each person that's coming on, because so much of each of our healing journeys and experiences is going to resonate with so many people. And if there's like one little spark that, touches someone that says, wow, that sounds like my story. Like maybe what I need to do for myself right now is just maybe some self-love work. Maybe I just need to look at, maybe I need to forgive someone. Maybe I need to forgive myself. It's like, it's just something small. Like no one's telling you to do some big to do. I mean, these are all things that take a lot of time. Like I can say, like, Phoenix, myself, like it's taken years for us to sit where we're sitting, still working on ourselves, still working on ourselves, right? But one of the things
Not a
I did,
party. Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted to touch on this, especially since you had specifically brought up, these
Hmm.
sort of broken, like romantic relationships that you were in, and what you were
Hmm.
drawing towards you because of your own energy and frequency. Because when
Mm.
you don't have the boundaries, when you don't have enough self-love, you are going to attract a certain kind of person. And it speaks volumes, the amount of work that you've done, because now the partner that you with, it's like, whoa. I mean, for you
Yeah.
both to draw each other, you know, into that
Hmm.
frequency, you both have had to do a lot of work. And, that's going to be a separate show where we get the both of you on, because, that'll be amazing too, to kind of hear from both of you, not just as a couple, but sort of like your individual journeys and your journeys together. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love that, you're doing this podcast where it's about, I'm pretty sure it's called Uncomfortable Conversations. And
Yeah.
I just love that because, everything that you're saying, it's about all of us here right now on the planet are here to do such important work. But a part of that is we
Mm.
have to be responsible for our own healing journeys, because as
Preach.
we
Yep.
do that, that's when you can share the wisdom. Like, I'm getting goosebumps. It's like, you've done all this work, he's done all this work. So
Hmm.
now what you're sharing is purely from like experience. And for me, this is what makes a difference. When people can hear themselves in other people's stories, that's the impact. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
marketing and sales and whatever. That's great, that has its place. But this, when people share from their heart, their authentic truth,
Yeah.
this is what happened, that's when I think we really get to people's core, where they suddenly
Hmm.
are like, okay, that just hit me in a whole other note that I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting.
I'm telling you, like, yeah, that's kind of where I was going when I was talking about the Facebook post. I kind of went on a tangent, but it was one of those moments where I just saw, I had a thought. I saw a video of a little girl. Her dad was giving her flowers, really tiny. I think they might have been like a year old. They, fascinated by flowers, and he just hugged him and was just kissing on him. I love you, Daddy loves you. And I saw honestly, the honest story behind this Facebook post is I saw that and I cried. I was in my bathroom getting dressed for work, and I just started to release. A lot of things came up to the surface that I didn't know were still underneath the water. And Christopher was here, and I remember him just letting me cry, like, get it out, release it. Um, and it was one of those good cries where like the tears, you think you're done and they keep coming. It was one of those moments. And I just thought about what my dad never um did that. Like I never got, I'll be honest, and this is not me throwing anyone under the bus, but this is how deep some of these wounds are with people. And it's not just me, but I don't think I got a real hug or a tight embrace until I was like 23, getting married. And, um, I just didn't get that affection or emotion from him. I know that my dad loves me, but he wasn't able or capable of showing up in ways for me that I needed at that time in my life. So this is where when you get into relationship with other people, of course, any little thing they throw at you, it could be the bare minimum. You just latch on to that because you've been starved of affection and you literally don't know what's authentic and what's not. And a lot of people think that that's kind of, silly or you're naive. You just, no, sometimes you're really programmed to not understand what healthy love is. So yeah, I mean, I posted that thing and it didn't even name him or anything like that. But I guess people could infer from that I was talking about my relationship with my dad. Never cursed him or disrespect him or anything, but I have a lot of family on Facebook. And someone decided to take that post and share it with him. And he's not even on social media. And that kind of spiraled into a really unfortunate, situation where we're not speaking right now. His choice. I love my father, but I also realized that, hey, if you're not gonna take the initiative or time to understand where that came from. And I would have never shared it because I would, if I'm going to share that type of thing, I would have wanted to kind of, you know, approach it more carefully. But it's out there. And this is the thing about authenticity and when you're healing and when you are the kind of person that I am, I don't take any, I don't feel any separation from myself when I'm sharing stuff with people. Like right now, this is just me, and it's a part of my personal journey. And I just encourage anyone watching that, you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to post anything. You don't have to talk about your trauma out in the open, but you do need to find an outlet where you can release and allow those things to come up to the surface. Because one thing is true, when you bury it, we implode and we never really address the core wounds. And so we repeat behaviors, right? And I just got tired of repeating scenarios that kind of mirrored what I saw. And I decided that I was going to let go and I was going to stop dating. I was going to, after my divorce, I was married for almost 10 years and I needed to heal. I needed to discover what exactly do you want to do? What do you want? What do you like? What does love look like for you? And even that is still a journey. Even being in a relationship now with a healed divine masculine. I mean, this guy, I get teary-eyed thinking about it. I better not cry. But I mean, he just you know what I mean, because you know this guy, you watch his content, but for those that don't know, he's got his own story. Really grew up, just had a hard time. And I think running into someone that understood that type of deep trauma, it became more than a trauma bond. It wasn't a trauma bond because we had both done the work. So by the time we met, it was like, wow, I get to see someone who's actually coursed through the same type of journey as I did. And when we come together, we could talk for hours. Like we're always building on each other. And I get to watch him grow. And he just loves me. He's kind to me. He's nice to me. He's not taking shots at me and my appearance or, saying little backhanded things to prop up his ego to make him feel like more of a man. He came as a whole man and I came as a whole woman. And we just want to share that. We don't, when we post, I know if you watch from Instagram, I know people may be tired of it and like, oh my God, get a room. But understand sometimes people just they haven't known that type of dynamic. They've never had that type of experience. And when they do find it, it's not about gloating or boasting, but sometimes we want to share that vibration because it is so powerful. I mean, there's nothing like two divine people, two divine masculine, feminine, coming together in that balance of energy. It's not about the sex, right? Male or female. It's not about that. It is that resonant energy that we all have. And when two healed people come together, they can change the world. And that's our mission, is to change the world, one conversation at a time. And hopefully people catch on and they walk away from the toxic conversations that we find, they start asking questions about, all right, well, who am I? And that's our goal. I'm wearing, by the way, part of our brand. I'll scoot back, but the Urban Indian is something we co-founded. Christopher, that's his baby. We met and we kind of merged our vision with just helping our people identify culturally and healing, collectively. And we're just so excited about so many things that we're doing. But that's a big reason why I think it's important to discover who you are so that you run into the right person. I think it is life changing for a lot of people, even people that watch our content.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing, because I think the other thing too, and there's so many layers again to this conversation, but I think, especially all around us, all you hear a lot of times is all these broken, things that are not working and just so in so many ways it's just not a good situation for so many people. So for me, it's so refreshing to see, you and Chris and like the work that you both are doing and putting out there, because that's what's needed. We've also got to show that side that is, neither one of you is claiming to be healed. All you're saying is we did our healing work. We continue to do our healing work.
Mm-hmm.
But between us, we've done enough of it where we can impart and share from our experiences to offer something to others who might be, again, right in the beginning, somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Any point that you catch people is a good point,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's definitely something that makes people stop and think. And both of you are like, also very deep. You're both extremely articulate about like how to put words to
Mm-hmm.
things like this, because trauma and all of these things that each of us experience, sometimes languaging is hard, right? Because it's so much about a feeling or like something you feel
Yeah.
inside. And to be
Yep.
able to speak it, the only time you can do that is if you've actually been in those shoes, because you can
Yeah.
articulate it and say, I understand what you've been through. Like, trust me, I've been in those shoes
Mm-hmm.
and I've done the work, and I'm ready to share because I want all of you to be able to experience this too. So, and I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it, sharing from a place of, like you said, it's not about gloating, it's not about boasting. Yes, some of it should be about celebrating,
Mm-hmm.
it should be about celebrating, but it's also saying this is available to everyone that wants it. There is some work, it's
Oh
not like
yeah.
magic.
Yes. Yes. And you're a product of that. This is why this moment, this conversation we're having is, I mean, when you really kind of dissect it, that is incredible that we met. I was doing a reading on Jennifer Rupien's Facebook Live, and that I think she had anticipated like 200 people watching or something. I was like, whoa, all right, let's do it. I'm gonna read these oracle cards. I'm just gonna be me. And I think you saw that and we connected. And I mean, done readings for you over the years. I can't believe I get to say years. And here we are on your platform. It is, it's indicative of everything we're saying, right? There is this journey and there really isn't an end, but we get to do these cool things on our way, and we get to just share that. And that is very beautiful. And I think I want to see more of that. I don't know about you, girl, but I want to see more of that when I log on to Instagram. I don't, I try not to share things that are divisive or, just kind of feed the monster. I think we do need to continue to cultivate the atmosphere of love and healing. We just got to do that. We've got to raise the vibration. I personally think that's the way that it happens is everyone takes responsibility for themselves and holds themselves accountable. And then we all kind of just, we rise.
Yes, let's elevate together, people.
Yes, let's do it.
So it's so interesting where we've come to our conversation, because one of the things we have not talked about in all of our detailing is all this beautiful intuitive gifts that you have. And I was going to ask you, when did you know that you had some sort of connection or gift, or was this when you were a kid, when you were older? I'm sure everyone would love to hear when this all kind of came about.
Oh, that's the juicy fun stuff. I love talking about esoterics and just, the science of the body and the mind. I love that. I think it's just so interesting because we're all so different. Um, I want to say, okay, this is probably twofold, and let me try to stay on track. Um, Growing up, little girl, I did have a lot of supernatural experiences. I mean, you name it, I've probably experienced it. I would often astral travel as a kid. Yeah, I did a lot of that. And it happened so frequently. And at this point, I'll just throw this in there. I wasn't religious at all. I wasn't really raised in the church. I had my belief, which is kind of passed down culturally, like most people. But all of that to say there was no really real connection to like Christianity during that period. I was still very much just me growing up. And I would astral project at the same time every night. I would wake up at 3:17 a.m. every morning, which means that I was doing the same thing every night. But my first astral projection experience, I actually went to India. I could smell, I could taste the food, I could understand the language. And even talking about it, I know how it feels to have been there. Like I was actually, it felt like as though I were actually physically there. I don't know if I was remote viewing when I did this, but I just remember coming back into my body and hearing like this popping sound. And I'm like, what was that? And I'm still a kid. So it's kind of like, okay, I don't know what's up with me, but I'm just gonna not talk about it. So I didn't talk about it. Until I got older and it was like, okay, when we were growing up, I don't know if you know this, mom, but this happened to me. And she's like, what? Why did you tell me? So just a lot of just things that were inexplicable. I couldn't really pinpoint because there was no religion to attach it to. But when I got into Christianity as a teenager, actually, I'm grateful for that period because it really kept me out of trouble. Um, but I needed that experience too, even though I've left Christianity. I don't really subscribe to any religion. But I do believe in the great divine spirit. I do believe that. I do believe there is such a being or presence or just, all around us and in us. But that's how I knew. And my mom would have some of the similar experiences with dreams. I would dream and it would come true like weeks, days, months later, sometimes years. But there was a lot of like foretelling or prophetic, some would say, with the women in my family. Knowing now who I am culturally, I'm like, oh, well, I was always an empath. I was always a heyoka, as we say, in some of our indigenous languages or circles. But basically a spiritual person, like a shaman or that person that carries that gift to see. And so over the years, I've just proudly separated myself from the confines of the religious institutions and I embraced my own spirituality, meaning I went back to what was happening as a kid and I tried to break it down and understand it. And it was a shameful period because, sometimes religious people can be tough, but I had to not care. I had to just kind of get over that hump and I became more bold and I started sharing on Instagram. Long story shorter, I got into a situationship with someone who I really cared deeply for. Um, and this thing became just kind of weird. It was like I was seeing their name, I was hearing numbers, seeing numbers, hearing their name. It was just a very odd phenomenon, and I couldn't explain it, but I just knew it was happening to me. And a lot of people go through this. You'll notice on YouTube, for example, a lot of twin flame talk, soulmate, twin flame, and I think there is some validity to that phenomenon because I experienced it, but to what end? And a lot of times people will do readings with tarot cards and not really give you that part. They don't really talk about reality in that sense. Well, you may believe that this person is for you, but to what end? What does that really mean? And so I did my research. It didn't work out because it wasn't supposed to. But from that one relationship or situation, that is where the floodgates opened for me because I was so deeply hurt that I had to find something else to make sense of that. And I began to study, different books I used to kind of understand esoterically what happened. Why was I astral traveling with this person? And, so that's how I got into oracle card reading. I really wanted to know for myself what the messages were from my ancestors, my guides, and the divine great spirit. As a former Christian, that was frowned upon. I'm sure there's people today that are like, "Oh, she's crazy." But through the intuitive gift of oracle reading, I don't necessarily need cards, but it has strengthened my intuition And that intuition is like a muscle. The more you work it, the more clear it becomes. And so for some reason it works, as I'll do a reading and it's just like spot on, and I just haven't stopped since. So that's how we got here. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that's amazing. And, just so everyone knows, I mean, I've had the honor and privilege of like popping into Sam's lives. Again, I'm calling her Sam because I'm so used to it, but
All
it's
good.
just amazing because, like the funniest thing to me sometimes is we'll do a reading and she'll be saying something and then she pulls a card. She's like, I just can't. I cannot, because she'll get like a confirmation before she even pulled the card. It's so
I'm
interesting. And
telling you.
so
Yeah.
that to me always points to like just it's almost like there is that such a strong gift and such a strong connection, right? That the messages are pouring in, and then it's just like, oh, well, we'll just give you another confirmation that what you were saying is accurate. So
It's incredible.
it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you go deep. And that's the thing, it's like you go deep in readings. Like when someone says,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I'll give you a reading, it's like,
Hmm.
a lot of times it's just kind of donation based. She's not even saying you need to pay XYZ. And you're in
Yeah.
there and you're getting like a deep reading and you're like, whoa. So it's amazing. So I hope that everyone that's listening, obviously all of her information will be in the bio section everywhere that this gets posted, so you will get a chance to be able to experience some of that yourself. And of course, I know that she also takes bookings for readings and things, so you'll be able to find that in her information. So I know that there's so many things we want to talk about. I wanted to make sure that we touched on this because it's important, but I also want to jump to a little bit more of what you're currently up to. And I know that you were kind of showing me this really cool book as we were talking
Oh yeah.
before we got on. So I wanted to make sure that if there's anything you want to share about like what you're working on now, what you're
Hmm.
doing, what you're excited about, please talk to us and share. We want to hear all about it.
Well, thank you, first of all, because this is such, a privilege to be able to share some of the work that Christopher and I, Traveling Bear and I have been doing. He's also indigenous, by the way, so you'll hear me say Traveling Bear. That is his indigenous name. He's Powhatan. Um, Fully well versed in culture, language, and so a lot of the content that we share kind of centers around that. I was actually into that before we met, believe it or not, and so that's what made it so like wild. I was like, whoa, like this guy really knows who he is. So we just have a lot of fun talking about culture and just rediscovering who we are as Indigenous American Indians. And part of that vision is the urban Indian. We do have a website which is linked to my Instagram and his too, but it's theurbanindian.org. And you may hear that word and think, well, what kind of Indian? We've gotten that question a lot, but it really just is about merging the old with the new, making sure that the past and the present kind of coalesce and come together to explain what happened to us throughout time and where we are today. And so he's authored a book, The Journey of the Urban Indian, which I'm actually helping him to edit because I've written my own book. Um, Phoenix Rising, A Poet's Tale. And I released this book, I want to say, I think 4 years ago. I actually really, really want to do it over. It's not as expansive as I would have liked for it to be, but it was good for that time, right? That's where I was in my healing journey, and a lot of the stuff in here kind of just talks about um what that felt like, the emotion, just dealing with those wounds and identifying them and bringing them up to the surface to heal. So I do want to add to that because I'm in a new place now, and I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, to be honest with you. And I don't credit Christopher for that happiness, but he's only built upon what the Great Spirit has allowed me to cultivate in myself. So we write about it. We're both going to release our books. He's going to release pretty soon. And in the meantime, this shirt that I'm wearing, I actually designed this. I
Mm.
don't, it's probably backwards on the video, but the Urban Indian. Um, it's a whole movement. You know, we want to educate our people. We want to have honest conversations about healing from a cultural perspective. So that's where this kind of comes into play. There's a lot of different projects in the works, but you'll see this brand more places. We're being more active about what we're doing together. And then we're just talking with people, you know, like sometimes people want to have a good conversation and they want to get things out. And we may not always have the answer, but sometimes people just want you to listen. And we enjoy that. And so you'll see us a lot of the times just kind of talking to people on Instagram and shooting the breeze on live. And then I may pop in with a card or two. So we just try to keep it organic and we want to see where this thing goes. But I know you'll have a chance to talk to him as well, one to one. He mentioned it. And you can learn more about, you know, what his vision and goals are. But together, I mean, that's kind of where we are. We want to build this thing up so that our children have something to carry throughout time and teach their children about who we really are. So that's like so super important to me right now.
Wow, I absolutely love that. I mean, look at you. You both have your books and publishing and everything together. Oh my gosh, I so love this. And listen, y'all, I knew Phoenix before Chris had even come into the picture, and she was already up to like a lot of cool stuff. So I love that it's almost like how I look at it. It's you ignite each other's missions and passion, and it's like this
Mhm.
co-creation that just like brings things together, but you also have your individual things that you're working on and this beautiful synergy of what you're doing. And obviously, like what you're
Yeah.
trying to bring in, I mean, it's just so powerful and so beautiful. And I'm just so excited for this
Thank
information to
you.
get out to more people. Obviously, you have a lot of people that already like connect with you, but for me, what's nice is, to bring in, as many sort of people who are coming in from like different spaces and healing journeys and what they're up to, because it's all about sharing that with others, and
Yeah.
never know who's going to listen or who's going to be like, wow, that's totally like something that I want to know more about. So I'm just
Hmm.
like, let's all, like I said before, like, let's all elevate together and support each other and, just give each other that support and love. And it's
Yes.
about like doing things together. I think that timing of each person for their own and like crawling up to the top and all of these
Hmm.
things, yes, I understand they do exist, but it's like there's so many possibilities of what we want to create, and we have to be the change that we want
Hmm.
to see. And that's what we're doing, like what you're doing, what Christopher's doing, what this
That's
podcast
it.
is doing, your work is doing. I mean, that's what we're doing. So it just
Yeah.
makes me so excited because it gives me hope for, we're not waiting for someone outside. Like we are taking the reins and
Mm.
saying, we are going to do this. We're going to do this together. And we're finding other people that are also in that frequency and,
Yes.
ready to just like bust out and make those changes.
That's it. That's it. And the energy is so tangible. I mean, you can feel it happening. Like I was just telling a friend the other day, you got to get on this train, you know, because if your vibration isn't right, you know, you find yourself in these places and these cycles, and we're more than capable of breaking through. But it's going to take a level of, like you said, authenticity and just be real about it, you know, but do it, you know. And you may not get it right the first time, but you got to keep going. You got to keep moving, as the great late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you can't crawl, you know, if you can't walk, crawl, he said, but no matter what, keep going. I always I love that message because I think the momentum is what's important, right? That you just don't get stuck in that emotion. You can feel something all day, but if you decide to stay there, that's when it becomes hard. But we want people to feel those emotions and we want them to be real about what hurts and let it come up, but don't get stuck there. And this is kind of what this book is about. And I promise I'm gonna bring a bigger, kind of more expansive work, but that really is where I found my way out of a lot of holes that I was in emotionally. Was I just kept moving. No matter how difficult, how scary, I just kept going and I never gave up. I never stopped believing in love. I never stopped believing that, I could heal, I could be happy. I always desired that and I attracted it, but I had to give it to me first. I had to really learn what that was. So here we are.
100%. 100%. I love that so much. And, I think that is the beauty of like everything that each one of us is doing. And of course, it's always a choice. You always get to choose. And, to me, there is no right or wrong. It's just we choose experiences, whatever that is for
Mm-hmm.
you. And so it's also saying that the beauty of some of us stepping into kind of more of the leadership roles, right? To say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be brave and courageous. I'm going to put something out there. It's not going to be perfect. I'm still on my journey, but being willing to do that because knowing that if we wait for perfection, honey, it's going to be like, 5 years from now and ain't nobody got time for that. Right.
Listen, don't do it. Don't do it. You'll be left behind. I'm telling
That's
you.
right. And like you
There's a lot
said,
of bitter people, that are just carrying around this anger and resentment. I know what that feels like. But at some point, you got to put those bags down. You got to go. You got to just go. Don't let it weigh you down.
yes. And this is why we're offering all these different tools and resources to say, you have so many more things today than we had even like a decade ago, even though my journey didn't really start until a few years
Yeah.
ago either. There's so much more that's available to each of us now. I mean, think about it. Like like I'm thinking back to like when you were growing up, Phoenix, like you
Mm-hmm.
had little to no resources. I mean, you had to kind of figure things out. Like, I've done the same. And for a lot of people, I mean, the privilege of having so much information available.
Ah,
Now, again, the thing also is, and we haven't talked too much about this, but it's also about like using your discernment, like making sure that
mm,
you really tune into yourself because we're so used to getting all this information from outside and it's good information, but you
yeah.
have to find the information that's right for you. Don't just like follow everything, right? It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what feels like it resonates with you, what feels like, okay, this is a match for me, or
Mm-hmm.
energy of the person or the vibe of someone. Like pay attention to all of these things. And the most important relationship you're ever going to have is the one that you have with yourself. So it's like that's kind of where you have to start first, but there are tools and resources to help you to be able to do that work. If you're like, I don't know how to start, I don't know how to do,
Mm-hmm.
great, start looking. And also trust that you are not alone. And
Mm.
regardless of whether you are you believe in God or this or that, I mean, the point is we all know that there is a something bigger than us. There's an
Oh yeah.
energy that's so much bigger than us.
Mm-hmm.
And know that you can trust that they're always by your side and they're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to help you in every way that they can. So be open to receiving that support. Like ask and say, I'm looking to heal myself. Please
Mm-hmm.
help me. Just the first step. And I promise you, some guidance will come in. If you're open to it, you will be led to something. I know that's what happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have all the verbiage, but I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what am I supposed to do? And boom, something came into my field. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yep.
let me look at this. And then that thing led to the next thing, to the next thing. So, I think that's a really important piece of it too. And we've done it and we've experienced it. But I think it's also for a lot of people who might be kind of more in the beginning parts of their journey, like,
Mm.
don't be intimidated. Like, don't be
Mm-hmm.
scared. Like, yes, it is challenging, but also look at it like, look where Phoenix and I are sitting today. We have spent time and energy and dedication to healing ourselves and wanting to experience the best versions of ourselves. That requires the investment, but know
Mm-hmm.
that there's many things out there that can support you on your journey.
Oh yeah. You said it all. You said it all. And I think the key too is, being consistent with whatever it is you find that works for you. Even if it is prayer, that's your thing. Like I think just being consistent and being intentional about it is really the big key, because again, like, meditation, prayer, is it nature walks, what is it? But if it works, do it, right? And if it changes, I think that's okay too. We kind of evolved and we find different ways to make this thing work. But the point is to just try, don't get stuck. But you gotta give it a shot. You gotta address those wounds. We can't just bandage them up but not clean it up. So I think that's been key for me is actually getting in there and really doing some of that work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that I want to make sure to say is, it's always hard when you're going through it because you can't see the silver lining at that moment. You're just in the thick of it
Mm-hmm.
and you're experiencing. And if there's a way for you to just have that thought in your mind that your pain truly is the biggest gift. I know you won't be able to see it in that moment, but it is your gift. And when you get to the other side of doing your healing work, that's when you can really share some of these like gems with everybody else because it's your personal experience, your transformation, your alchemy that you can
Mm.
share with others. So, just I know it's hard in the moment, but just remember for two people who have been navigating that that's something that we both are experiencing because we went through and we did all this work. Look at where we're sitting today and where we're
Mm-hmm.
looking to grow and expand into is, so much is possible.
It's beautiful too. It's so much fun. It's fun. Isn't it fun, V? Like you get to walk in your purpose, man, and then you get to see
Yes.
people benefit from that. That's such a beautiful offering. I love being in this space with people like you. Chris and I talk about that a lot. Like if everyone just kind of found themselves and knew, man, we would move so many mountains as a collective. But we'll get there. I'm optimistic.
Yes. Yes, we will definitely get there. And I think the fact that people like you, me, and Christopher, like, we are doing the work to really to share it with as many people as possible.
Hmm.
That's it. As long as it's coming from that really beautiful heart-centered intention of wanting to share with others because you truly want them to experience this joy and like all the possibilities that are there. Um,
Hmm.
that's really it.
That's it. It's so simple, isn't it? There's no magic formula.
Oh, there is no magic formula.
No.
However, the beauty is that this is why we, indulge in these conversations. For me, that's the beauty of having this podcast is being able to bring in all these different viewpoints and perspectives and journeys because we don't know who's going to listen. We don't know who's it's going to touch and impact. And for me, that's the most exciting thing. If one person is moved or has something that they resonate with, for me, I feel just so excited about that, that's a possibility. And so I'm content with that. I'm just like, yes, awesome. Like someone
Yep.
got to like receive something from this, and that always brings me so much joy. And so we're now moving into that place after all this beautiful conversation, which you and I could go on and on, is one of my favorite parts also in the podcast is always to be a way to showcase everyone's like gifts. And so I would love to request you if you want to like pull a card or two for the collective. That would be
Oh
amazing.
yeah. Let's do it. Let's see. I have these two decks sitting here and I'm like filling them out. I always like to do that. I try to listen in clairaudiently because I hear too, clairaudience and claircognizance. It's just kind of that inner knowing. Um, I'm drawn to this one. Let's see. This is the Sandra Ann Taylor Oracle deck. So these aren't actual tarot cards. And sorry for the loud shuffle, but this is how I should say, a lot of people kind of clear the energy. And I always see this, like, I don't know if this is cultural, but kind of like a form of respect that the Gray Spirit would speak and inspire your intuition to hear clearly. So that's kind of how I do it. But I'm going to ask for one card for the collective. For those that will watch this episode, what does Spirit most want us to know? All right, V, we're gonna wish for that one that one card. Give it one more go. Wow. We know when I say that, wow, it's a thing, right? I am gonna say wow again. I really mean this because whenever you think about like collective readings, it's supposed to feed, everybody who's watching. So, and we've been talking about healing. So, and this is the big reveal. So we've got the heart chakra card here.
Wow.
So yeah, so this, and then you'll notice that there's a 38, right? Isn't that 11?
Yes.
So that 11, that master number that a lot of us kind of either you see as a synchronicity, you may see 1111. That is that number carries such a powerful vibration. It speaks about the gateway, right? In Christianity is interesting. There's a scripture that talks about the eye of the needle, and it says that it'd be harder for a camel to pass through or something like that. I don't want to misquote it, but the idea is that we shed parts of ourselves in order to get to where we ultimately are supposed to be, from a spiritual perspective. So I feel like with the heart chakra card, this is really about an elevating in consciousness for the collective from the heart space. And we just talked about it, which is why I said, wow, because it really is going to take that healing. It's going to take that healing work for each individual person, as a part of this collective to do that inner work, to do that heart chakra work and correct some things inside so that we can hear clearly. We know how to make better decisions, right? Because when you're healed, you're clear, right? When you know who you are, you're clear. And sometimes there's just layers to it and it's not easy, but I feel like the Great Spirit is telling us all to take a stab at it, um, to give it a shot and just try to address some of those things that, we see as a challenge. For example, what I did as far as the inner child healing work, I would stand in the mirror and I would literally speak to the little girl in me. Sometimes I would look at an old picture of myself when I was like 3 or 4. And that you'd be surprised at how deep you go with that. But it was all about that, what heart centered, all about that emotion that had been kind of, pooling up. And then finally it all broke open for me and I could release, I could cry. I could, write letters to people that have hurt me to say that hurt. I wouldn't always deliver the message, but at least writing it down also kind of carried a really powerful symbolism and vibration because when we write things down, they become alive. So I think part of the message also is to be intentional about your healing, right? When you think about how precious the heart is, not even just as an organ, right? It powers everything in the body, but in a spiritual sense, the heart space is kind of the core and the center. We thinking about, the way the chakras are aligned. Some people think that is the solar plexus. It's kind of like your life force energy, but the heart is connected to everything. Everything flows through the heart space. Whether you're going up or down, right? If you're going down into those lower chakras, right, where we become kind of rooted in third density, meaning our third dimensional world, what we touch, taste, and hear. But as you kind of come up, right, you start dealing with the root, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat chakra, third eye, and crown, right? Because we've still had to move through the heart space though. No matter, it's so interesting, isn't it? No matter which way you spin it, you got to go through the heart. And I feel like Spirit is saying there's no way to avoid this kind of work. You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to dig deep and figure out what makes this thing tick. And it's gonna be different for everybody. But I do see that, because it's represented by an angel figure, right? So as symbolism, I think that it is very much a collective thing where you'll start to see people kind of choose which side of the fence they're on. Are they going to stay rooted in their density and those lower kind of vibrational spaces? Or are we going to elevate from within? And guess what? Spirit is saying it has nothing to do with anyone else. I can't reach inside of V's chest and work on her heart. I can't do that the way I would a physical body. But we've got to take account for what's going on inside this thing. And I'll leave you with this. Sometimes our religious systems are, I want to be respectful, but I think they can sometimes stifle our growth as human beings, because there's always this external thing outside of you that you're trying to get close to or hear from or know or read from a book to understand. But when it comes to you and who you are and understanding what makes you move, sometimes I think it takes us separating ourselves from everything around us and outside of us and really go inside. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. It started with this most recent Cancer moon, right? We had a full moon in Cancer. Emotions were high and intense. And then we had it in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. A lot of people have DM'd me and inboxed me like, okay, what is going on? I need a reading. But I think that's kind of that clarion call. It's almost like the universe is beckoning to everyone, hey, you got some work to do. And it starts with you and it ends with you, because it's never about anyone else, right? Nothing happens to us, it happens for us. So I think a lot of us will continue to cultivate the healing of the heart space. And you'll see that kind of collective consciousness rising. People will be more kind, patient. I got to work on that patience thing. But, these are the gifts that come to us when we open ourselves up to that expansive healing work outside of our religious spaces. And I'm not saying that you're wrong if that happens in church. That may be for you at this time in your journey. But what I am saying is, when you get home and you're not in those buildings and those temples, and it's just you and the Great Spirit, there's a conversation to be had. And sometimes that happens within meditation. Sometimes it happens out in nature. For me, it happens when I'm driving my car. I just like to be alone and I can hear. But don't be afraid to be alone, because this work here has to be done alone for now. I think a lot of people don't understand that. My last point, alone is not a final destination, it's a pit stop. I dealt with loneliness, I dealt with heartache, being deeply, deeply wounded in my heart space. So I know what I'm talking about. And it manifested into a pain in my heart. I had to go to the cardiologist and figure out what's going on. Like, I'm getting palpitations. I felt like it was going to stop at one point. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, my brother, I call him brother more than a friend, Xavier Kemp, brilliant artist. I mean, this guy, I think you've seen Xavier, right? Just a beautiful person. I mean, never complains, has been through a lot, but he told me something. He said, your heart. He said, I have a piece of, actually, do I have it here? I don't think I have it here. But yeah, I do. Let me show you. How convenient. So he made this for me. This is a healing staff, and it just has different crystals and stones in it that he's, deemed appropriate for me. He's made one for my daughters too. They have little short ones, but this is a piece of, I think, carnelian. And he said, I put that on there because you've got a lot of work to do in your heart space. The cord, you're probably curious real quick, it plugs in. So it actually activates the golden rods that are running through it. And when I got it, it hadn't been plugged in because he shipped it. This thing was warm to the touch. It hadn't been plugged in weeks. So, sometimes we frown on this. When we leave those religious spaces, they've taught us and they've conditioned us to kind of be afraid of stuff. And it's like, well, this is older than your books. This is older than your scripts. This is older. And there's nothing evil about it. But, anyway, point made, the heart space was important for me. And so that is where I begin to zero in on it. Quick tip is, I wrote a letter. Like I said, I wrote a letter to my father. I wrote a letter to a couple of different guys I've been dealing with. Never sent it, but I wrote it and I dealt with the emotion, and then I burned it, and I just opened the window, and it was just a symbolism. There was no voodoo or anything behind it. Not that those things are bad, right? But Um, that for me was a very pivotal moment because I had to really release some things from my heart space. It created that pain created and the trauma and pain created a cage around my heart. And so here we are. I really don't have those pains anymore. They're not manifesting in my body. And they were also inexplicable. When I went to the doctor, they were like, you don't see anything wrong. So sometimes it's not to do with, a sickness. Sometimes you manifest illness in your body because you just haven't gone deep, you know? So that's the message. I could go on and on, as you know, but I'm honored. I'm so honored to do this work and to be doing it with my dear friend here. And yeah, if anyone's ever interested in a reading, I'm always happy to do it. I will make sure you have a way to book with me. But I want to thank you, Vanita, for having me on your platform. I'm so happy for you and I'm so proud of you. And it's just so beautiful to see you elevating the way that you are and inspiring other people to do it. So
Oh, thank you so much. And that was just such an amazing, deep reading. And I love how it came back kind of full circle to things that we've been talking about. It's like the perfect card that, of course, Spirit was going to bring that card forward and
yeah.
bringing us back to how it comes back to healing and the heart and the self. And so I just loved everything that you shared and all the tips and your personal story intermingled and all of that. And it's just been such a delight and treat to connect with you today, to
Oh,
learn
thank
about
you.
everything that you're up to and to be able to be on this journey with you as we're sort of like, just doing the work and elevating ourselves and spreading our light and really wanting to create the world that we want to see. Like we're creating it. And so that couldn't be more
Step by
exciting than
step.
that, right? I was like,
Yes.
can't be more exciting than that.
It's fun.
So
It is fun. It really, we're not being phony. It actually is really fun, isn't it? It's really fun.
yes, yes,
I enjoy
absolutely.
it.
So thank you again so much for joining me.
Oh,
And
you're
it's
welcome.
just been such a blast. And just to remind everyone that's listening, all of her information is going to be in the bio section everywhere that this gets posted. So feel free to reach out to her. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I hope
Yeah.
that this episode feeds and nourishes your soul in some way. And just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. And I can't wait to catch you all on the next episode.